Unless the Lord builds a house, they labour in vain that build it. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. I don't know whether you're interested in politics. I don't know whether you're interested in the news. You may be the sort of person, and I know many like that just turn off the news when it comes on because they find it too depressing. I'm one of these people that I actually go at news time on the hour to hear what the news is. And I am quite a political animal. I do have political views, but I don't really proclaim them from the pulpit because I don't feel that's my place and I don't feel that's my calling. But I want to be semi-political today because there is a crossover, obviously, between what we believe as Christians and the kind of political views we have. Thanks, Jenny. I appreciate that. Coming a bit closer. It's good. I want to read to you a quote from a news article just before we went on holiday. There was a big march in London, as you're well aware of, led by Tommy Robinson and others. And the article says this: over 100,000 protesters have taken to the streets in London as part of the Unite the Kingdom movement, with all the flags and all of that. Protesters for Unite the Kingdom have congregated around Waterloo Station in central London to hear from right-wing figureheads like Tommy Robinson, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump's former strategist. A counter-protest, the March Against Racism, has been organised by Stand Up to Racism with over 5,000 people in attendance, far lower than the 100,000, but a significant number. The Unite the Kingdom protest has been organised in large part as a response to concern over immigration, with placards and flags seen at the rally calling on the government to stop the boats. It comes after the nationwide growth of Operation Raise the Colours, which aimed to see flags like the St George's Cross and the Union Jack raised in support of, and catch this, British/English heritage and pride. Now, with just that, I would have looked at that and instead said, BNP have been doing that for decades, British National Party, been doing that for decades. However, Premier Christian Radio, who have a news section, posted this. And this is an interesting slant on it. A huge rally organised on the theme Unite the Kingdom by former EDL, English Defence League, leader Tommy Robinson concluded with worship songs and prayer from a platform set up in Whitehall before speeches by right-wing politicians from across Europe. Attended by, and they say, 150,000 people marching through central London on Saturday, the demonstration included displays of wooden crosses held high, images of Christ on flags, and banners declaring Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. Churchgoers attending did so despite prior warnings from some London church leaders that leaders of the march were linked to division and racial intolerance. It's a crusade cross. It represents the crusaders who drove the Muslims and Islamists from Europe, commented a protester from Walsall as his reason for carrying his flag. Speaking to Premier Christian News, Peter said he was a cultural Christian and didn't attend any church, but that he wanted at least 1 million Muslims deported from Britain. In the same way Donald Trump is removing illegals in America. When pressed for details of which church they worshipped at, other flag bearers, including those carrying flags inscribed with Bible verses, admitted they were not active Christians. But others on the march clearly were. Walking in the crowds on the way to Westminster, a group of Christians from Chelmsford, Essex, wore T-shirts with Bible verses and bearing Christian iconography, little things of Mary and whatever. They said they backed the march as they were English patriots. Tom told Premier that they didn't feel listened to by politicians in Westminster. We need to proclaim Christ first, and we need to bring England back as a Christian country, he said. Now, can you see, are you as confused as me in all of this? Because on one hand, you can probably see things that, oh, I can identify with that. On the other hand, you can say, oh, I can't identify with that. And yet, for the first time in my knowledge, on a demonstration like that, you've got a Christian influence as well. So it got me thinking when I was on holiday, and I tried to wrestle my way through it, and I'm going to present something to you that might help you or might further confuse you. You might agree with me or you might disagree, but I'm just sharing my thoughts with you before I come to more steady ground, which is the Word of God. This is, I believe, what people are calling a Christian nationalism. It's where we've got a strong Christian emphasis and a strong nationalist emphasis in flowing into one another. But what do they mean by Christian? I want to say one thing first. The church is not called to build a nation. There is nothing in the New Testament or in the words of Jesus where we can take it that the church is called to build a nation. It's not the church's job to build a nation. That's the job of its citizens. That's the job of its leaders. That's the job of its king or its president or its leading politicians or its government. It's not the church's job to build a nation. There is no such thing as a Christian country. There is no such thing as a Christian nation. Only perhaps a nation or a country where the majority are Christians. And that's a really important thing to grasp. We do use the term loosely Christian country, and I'll come to that later. But essentially, we are not called, the church isn't called to build a nation. Secondly, the nation isn't called to build church. The church isn't called to build a nation. A nation isn't called to build a church. That's Jesus' task. It's not even the church's task to build church. It's Jesus' task. Didn't we read that? I will build my church. So, Charles, Your Royal Highness, it's not your job. It's not even your job to defend the faith. You might want to defend the faith. You might think it's a good thing. But do you know what? I'm going to defend the faith, says Jesus. It's my faith. It's my church. The nation is not called to build the church. That's the task of the Lord Christ. He will preserve. He will prosper. He will protect the church. I will build my church. So you can discuss that afterwards. Send me a message saying you disagree if you like, but I'm pretty convinced it's not the church's job to build a nation, and it's not the nation's job to build a church. So what do we mean by a Christian country? Because I'm happy with people saying we used to be a Christian country, if I know what they understand by it. I'm happy to adopt the phrase that was used of Scotland 100 years ago, Bible-loving Scotland. I'm proud of that we were once Bible-loving Scotland. So what do we mean by a Christian country? Well, maybe one that's historically built on Christian values and traditions. Our nation has been built on Christian values increasingly since the early monks brought the word over, since in about 900 AD, 1000, King Alfred started to establish Britain, started to establish the nation, started to install churches and so forth, and there became a move to bring Christianity into the full. Paganism was persecuted, Christianity became dominant, and before you knew it, this country was Christian in terms of its values, in terms of its traditions, in terms of its celebrations. That's just a fact. And there was a national rhythm to Britishness. And it's a national rhythm that we've lost. For example, Christmas was Christmas throughout the nation. There was a time when, I guess 90% of Brits went to church on Christmas Day to celebrate the birth of Jesus. If you asked any citizen, what's Christmas about? They would say that's when God sent his son. He sent him at Bethlehem through the Virgin Mary. Do you not know that? We were taught that in our Sunday school. We're taught that in our schools. Then there was, of course now, we don't have Christmas. We got Santa Claus. There's more about Santa Claus than there is about Jesus in our shops and in our society and in our placards. Nice lights. Might get an angel or two. Then we come to Easter. We don't have Easter now. We've got Easter Bunny. Easter Bunny is much more accessible. Easter egg. But it used to be that people went to church to celebrate. What are you celebrating? Oh, the death and resurrection of Jesus. We've been celebrating Lent. And as Catholics, we've had Ash Wednesday when we've put ash on our brows and so forth. It was just been a bit distracted. It was being celebrated as Easter. These things were part of our rhythm. Harvest festivals, when we would bring stuff to church, what would you bring? Apples and leeks and stuff. And we would be celebrating harvest. We don't have that so much, but hey, we've got something better now. We've got Halloween. So everywhere we're celebrating blood, gore, fantasy, horror, death, witches, warlocks, and all the rest. That's what we're celebrating now. And this bizarre kind of paradox, in my thinking, between child protection and child safety and this thing that is called Halloween that seems to be everything but. And perhaps even children without responsible adults knocking on your door, knocking on a stranger's door. You don't talk to strangers, do you? So the rhythm of Christmas, of Easter, of harvest, our baby needs to be christened so that we take them along to church. And so you dedicated your baby. I know that for many it was just a tradition, it was just a habit, but it was a rhythm of life that was there. For others, like the nonconformists, like myself, we would say, no, we don't do that, we do dedication. And our prayer is that our child will come to church one day and be baptized, be dedicated. Oh, your daughter's getting married. What church is she getting married in? Nowadays we have to ask the question, what, she's marrying a man or a woman? That was standard. Married in church, because it was part of the rhythm of life. When death came along, there was a funeral service, giving thanks to the one who died to give us life. We bury the person in the sure and certain hope of the resurrection. Now, can you see how all of that provided a rhythm? For some people, and in certain generations, for a lot of people, it was a spiritual reality. For others, it was a tradition, but it gave us the rhythm of life. And with that came the Christian values that the gospel proclaimed. And so the early church was very instrumental in releasing the little children from serving in the mines and from going up chimneys, establishing Sunday school, where although the children couldn't get to school because they were working, they could come and study the scriptures. The idea of them being taught to read was so that they could read the Bible for themselves. That had been the great dream of the reformers, that even a ploughboy would understand more of the scriptures than the Pope. And so they established schools for the children. William Wilberforce, John Newton drove the force to abolish slavery, that every man is free. And so on, and so on, and so on. Forget his name, the chap in Bristol that raised up orphanages.
Brunel, is it?
George Muller, that raised up orphanages for the waifs and strays in Bristol. All of that, as we prayed earlier, John Newton, who lived in a time when gin was a scourge, and he presented the gospel to miners and to workers who repented of their sins and they stopped drinking. Revivals in Wales where the pubs closed. And I wonder, is that what some people are thinking about when they say we would like to get back to being British again? Have we lost a rhythm? Have we lost a national identity that we used to have? And so they forlornly hold a Bible that they've never read. They hold up a cross with a Jesus on it that they've never surrendered to. They talk about Islam as a malevolent force when they've never been to church in their lives. You see, there's a huge vacuum a huge spiritual vacuum. And to me, it's not a surprise that younger generations are saying there's something more. Surely there's something more than this. But here's the bad news. We can't get it back. We can't get being British in that sense back. It's like we've thrown out the baby with the bathwater. You can get the bathwater back, but you can't get the baby, and what's the point in that? We can only get this back one soul at a time. So maybe it will never come back. Maybe Scotland will never be Bible-believing Scotland. Maybe England will never see national revival again. But maybe it will. Maybe it will. But when we see these guys and women marching with their crosses and their Bibles, they recognize they're looking for something. They're looking for something that they used to identify with as a Christian country, but they can't have it without Jesus. And so, all of that is to say this: it falls back on us. It falls back on us. I will build my church. But Jesus says to his church, go and make disciples. Don't go and make a nation. Go and make disciples. And these disciples will be citizens. And the more Christians there are, the more Christian citizens there are. The more Christian councillors there are. The more Christian MPs there are. The more Christians there are in the house of the Lord. The more Christians there are in the monarchy. And then we will see a change. I hope I'm talking sense. The Lord is building his church in this land through you and I. And so I think what we can do is treasure those rhythms of life. Treasure those rhythms of life. Those things that we believe the Lord has said is important. Model them. Don't try and impose them over other people because they don't belong to Jesus. But let them look on and say, hey, have you noticed how these Christians, they just seem to be fulfilled in the life that they have. They seem to have a joy that others don't have. They seem to have a certainty about life that other people haven't. They don't worship Santa Claus. They're still going to church on Christmas Day and saying, Jesus is Lord. This is the baby that God has sent. They still believe in the resurrection. The new Archbishop of Canterbury is a woman. I don't have any problems with that. Incidentally, I don't have any problems with that. I have problems with some of her beliefs because she's quite liberal in her sexual ethics, and I have a problem with that. And for that reason, a large group of Anglican churches in Africa and South America have broken away from the Anglican Church, or are in the process of, because of that. And they said, and it was interesting, we're not breaking away. We are the Anglican Church. They're breaking away. We're holding to what we've always held. That's interesting. But I noticed she was asked by a commentator, do you believe in the virgin birth? And do you believe in the resurrection? Fairly basic question for a Christian. I expected her to skirt round it and say, well, yes. Symbolically, and all this kind of stuff. She said, no, I believe it. I thought, that's what we need to establish in our churches. Don't let the world squeeze you into its mould, says the scriptures. Establish your rhythm, maintain your rhythm, hold to your values, preach the gospel passed down from the generations, and seek to save this nation, one soul at a time. And lastly, pray for our nation. 2 Chronicles 7, famous verse, you know it. If my people, who are called by my name, will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sin and I will heal their land. Wow, I will heal the land.